What if I told you that America's most wanted serial killer was hiding in plain sight for over 3 decades, living just miles from where he dumped his victims' bodies? What if I told you he was a successful Manhattan architect who helped design the skyline of New York City while secretly hunting women under the cover of darkness? What if I told you that every time his family left town for vacation, another woman would disappear forever? Rex Heuermann fooled everyone. His neighbors, his colleagues, his own family, while allegedly murdering at least 7 women across 30 years. He watched the news coverage of his crimes, researched his own victims online, and even monitored the police investigation trying to catch him. This monster walked among us, and nobody suspected a thing. Until now. Before we dive into this shocking case, make sure to subscribe to Dark Trail Files and hit that notification bell. We bring you the most compelling true crime stories, meticulously researched and expertly told. You won't want to miss a single episode. Now, let's uncover the truth behind one of Long Island's darkest secrets. December 11th, 2010. A Suffolk County police officer and his canine partner were searching the thick brush along Ocean Parkway on Gilgo Beach, Long Island. They weren't looking for bodies. They were searching for Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old sex worker who had disappeared 8 months earlier after making a frantic 911 call, screaming that someone was trying to kill her. What they found instead would shock the nation. Wrapped in burlap, partially concealed in the brambles, lay the skeletal remains of a woman. But this wasn't Shannon Gilbert. This was someone else entirely. Someone who had been missing for over a year. The bones were weathered by salt, air, and time, picked clean by scavengers, but the burlap told a story of deliberate disposal. The officer continued his search along the isolated stretch of highway. Within days, 3 more bodies were discovered along the same desolate corridor. 4 women, all in their 20s, all sex workers, all disposed of in an eerily similar manner. The burlap sacks, the positioning exactly 10 feet apart, the remote location, everything suggested the work of a methodical, organized serial killer. The media dubbed him the Gilgo Beach Killer, and he had been hunting for over a decade. The first victim identified was Megan Waterman, 22 years old from Maine, last seen alive in June 2010 at a holiday in Express in Hauppauge. She had told friends she was meeting a client, but never returned. Then came Amber Lynn Costello, 27, a mother from North Carolina who had vanished in September 2010 after leaving her house to meet someone she'd connected with online. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, from Connecticut, missing since July 2007 after advertising escort services on Craigslist. And finally, Melissa Barthélemy, 24, from New York, who disappeared in July 2009 after meeting a client at the Bronx Port Authority. These 4 women became known as the Gilgo Four. But investigators suspected this was just the beginning of something much larger and more sinister. As the search expanded across the marshy, windswept terrain of Long Island's barrier beaches, more bodies emerged from their sandy graves. By April 2011, 10 sets of human remains had been recovered along Ocean Parkway and nearby beaches. Some were complete skeletons, others just scattered bones. Some victims were identified, others remained nameless. The killer's hunting ground was vast, his timeline extensive, his methods chillingly consistent across different years and locations. But who was responsible for this carnage? For over a decade, that question would haunt Long Island, baffle investigators, and torment the families of the victims. The case consumed resources, destroyed careers, and left the community living in fear. The investigation faced countless obstacles. The remote crime scenes had been contaminated by weather and wildlife. Potential witnesses were reluctant to come forward due to the stigma surrounding sex work. Digital evidence was limited by the technology available in the early 2000s when some murders occurred. Lead after lead went nowhere. The case went cold. Years passed like seasons of grief. Families mourned without closure, holding on a hope that someday, somehow, justice would come for their daughters. The killer remained free, possibly still hunting, always watching, perhaps even following the media coverage of his crimes with twisted satisfaction and pride in his ability to evade capture. Then in 2022, everything changed. Suffolk County elected a new district attorney who made solving the Gilgo Beach murders his top priority. A new task force was formed with fresh eyes and cutting-edge technology. Advanced DNA analysis was deployed. Genetic genealogy techniques that had solved other cold cases were brought to bear. And for the first time in years, investigators had real hope. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to discover about the man living in their midst. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a piece of pizza. But how could a simple slice lead investigators to Long Island's most wanted man? The answer would reveal just how close the killer had been hiding in plain sight, watching the investigation unfold while living just miles from his dumping ground. The Gilgo Beach investigation had consumed countless hours, endless resources, and entire careers. Veteran detectives retired without solving it. Task forces were disbanded and reformed. Political careers rose and fell based on promises to crack the case. Hope faded like morning mist over the Atlantic. But the families never gave up. They demanded answers, justice, closure for their murdered daughters, sisters, and mothers. In early 2022, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney made a solemn promise to the community and the victims' families. He would solve this case. He would bring the killer to justice. He assembled a new task force equipped with cutting-edge forensic technology and fresh perspectives unencumbered by years of failed leads and false starts. They began methodically re-examining every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every lead, every theory that had been explored over the past 13 frustrating years. The breakthrough came through genetic genealogy, the revolutionary technique that had solved the Golden State Killer case and dozens of other cold cases across the country. DNA recovered from the victims and crime scenes was run through public genealogy databases like GeneMatch, creating detailed family trees that could potentially lead investigators directly to their suspect through blood relatives who had submitted DNA for ancestry research. But genetic genealogy could only narrow down the suspect pool. They needed more. They needed fresh DNA samples to compare against their evidence. They needed definitive proof that would hold up in court and convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt. This is where the pizza comes in, and where the story takes its most bizarre turn. Rex Heuermann was living what appeared to be a completely normal suburban life in Massapequa Park, Long Island. The 59-year-old architect owned RH Consultants and Associates, a successful Manhattan architectural firm. He was married to Asa Ellerup, had 2 adult children, and seemed to blend seamlessly into his middle-class neighborhood, despite being something of an oddball. His house was cluttered and poorly maintained. His yard was overgrown with weeds, and neighbors found him strange but harmless. Nothing about his outward appearance or lifestyle screamed serial killer. Yet something had brought him to the attention of the task force. Whether through genetic genealogy, cell phone analysis, or good old-fashioned detective work, Rex Heuermann had become a person of interest in the Gilgo Beach murders. In January 2023, surveillance teams began monitoring Heuermann around the clock. They followed him from his cluttered Massapequa home to his Manhattan office. They tracked his movements, documented his routine, photographed his associates. They were building a comprehensive case, but they needed that one crucial piece of evidence, fresh DNA that could be definitively linked to the crime scenes. The opportunity came on an ordinary Tuesday when Heuermann ordered lunch from a pizzeria near his Manhattan office. After finishing his meal, he discarded the pizza box in a trash can outside the building. Surveillance officers immediately retrieved the box and rushed it to the crime lab, where technicians extracted DNA from traces of saliva and skin cells left on the crust and the cardboard where his hands had touched. The results were staggering and definitive. The DNA was a perfect match to genetic material found on restraints used on at least 3 of the Gilgo Four victims. After 13 years of dead ends and false hopes, they finally had their killer. But this was just the beginning of a much larger and more horrifying story. Rex Heuermann wasn't just connected to these 4 murders. As investigators delved deeper into his background, a terrifying pattern emerged that stretched back decades. Cell phone records placed his device connecting to towers near the locations where several victims were last seen alive. His internet search history revealed disturbing obsessions with torture, bondage, violent pornography, and the victims themselves. He had been researching the ongoing investigation, monitoring media coverage, reading online forums, and staying one step ahead of law enforcement for over a decade. Most chilling of all, the timeline of murders seemed to correlate perfectly with his family's absences from their Massapequa home. When his wife and children traveled to visit relatives or take vacations, women disappeared from Long Island streets and ended up dead along Ocean Parkway. On July 13, 2023, Rex Heuermann was arrested outside his Manhattan office as he walked to lunch. But as investigators executed search warrants on his home and business, they uncovered evidence that suggested his crimes stretched back much further than anyone had imagined. How many more victims were there? And what horrors would the forensic teams discover in the house where he had lived for decades? The arrest of Rex Heuermann sent shockwaves through Long Island and beyond. For 13 years, families had waited for this moment. For 13 years, a predator had walked free among them. Now, finally, there's a face to put to the monster that had terrorized their community. But as investigators searched Heuermann's properties, the true scope of his alleged crimes began to expand dramatically and horrifyingly. His Massapequa Park home was a hoarder's nightmare. Rooms filled floor to ceiling with architectural plans, old furniture, magazines, and disturbing personal items that suggested a deeply troubled mind. In his basement workshop, investigators found a collection of weapons, including firearms that matched the calibers of bullets found near some crime scenes. Computers and hard drives contained thousands of files, many deliberately deleted but recoverable through advanced forensic techniques. The digital evidence painted a picture of a man utterly obsessed with his crimes and the investigation that followed. Heuermann had been monitoring news coverage religiously, reading online forums about the case, researching the detectives hunting him, and even looking up information about the victims' families and their ongoing grief. He knew every detail of the investigation because he had been following it like a twisted fan following his favorite television show. Cell phone data was equally damaging to any possible defense. Records showed Heuermann's phone connecting to cell towers near multiple locations where victims were last seen alive. On the nights of several disappearances, his phone had traced routes through areas where investigators now believe he was actively hunting for victims or disposing of bodies. Most disturbing were his internet searches, which revealed a level of premeditation that was truly chilling. Investigators found evidence that he had been researching specific victims before they disappeared, looking up their online advertisements, studying their social media profiles, and gathering personal information about their habits and routines. After their deaths, he continued monitoring media coverage of their cases, seemingly reveling in the chaos and fear his actions had created throughout the community. The pattern was always the same and heartlessly calculated. When his family was away visiting relatives or taking vacations, Rex Heuermann allegedly transformed from suburban architect into predatory killer. By December 2023, investigators felt confident enough to expand the charges dramatically. Heuermann was now accused of killing Sandra Costia in 1993, a brutal murder that had gone unsolved for 30 years. Then came charges in the deaths of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, bringing his total alleged victim count to 7 women spanning 3 decades of hunting and killing. But investigators strongly believe there may be many more victims waiting to be discovered. The task force is actively reviewing dozens of unsolved cases throughout the region and beyond, looking for connections to Heuermann's methods, timeline, travel patterns, and areas of operation. As 2024 progressed, Heuermann's defense team began mounting their case, claiming the DNA evidence was contaminated and the digital evidence was merely circumstantial. But prosecutors had one more devastating piece of evidence they were preparing to reveal in court. Something so damning and undeniable it could seal Heuermann's fate forever and eliminate any possibility of reasonable doubt. Throughout 2024, The legal machinery slowly ground forward with the weight of justice. Rex Heuermann sat in his jail cell, maintaining his innocence while prosecutors built what they claimed was an absolutely airtight case against him. His family's life completely imploded under the weight of the accusations. His wife immediately filed for divorce. His children retreated from all public view, and his architectural business collapsed overnight as clients fled. The prosecution's case was methodical, comprehensive, and devastating. DNA evidence linked him directly to multiple victims through genetic material that could not be explained away. Cell phone data placed him at crucial locations at exactly the right times. Digital forensics revealed his obsessive monitoring of the case and research into the victims. Weapon evidence suggested links to additional murders that hadn't even been charged yet. But Heuermann's defense team wasn't backing down from what seemed like an impossible fight. They argued that DNA evidence could be contaminated through poor collection or storage procedures. They claimed that cell phone data was merely circumstantial and that proximity didn't prove guilt. They insisted that internet searches weren't proof of murder and that their client was an eccentric man caught up in an overzealous investigation by prosecutors desperate for closure in a high-profile case. Pre-trial hearings became intense battlegrounds over evidence admissibility. The DNA evidence, so crucial to the prosecution's case, faced intense scrutiny from defense experts who questioned every aspect of collection methods, chain of custody procedures, and laboratory protocols. Every piece of digital evidence was challenged. Every witness statement was dissected. Every forensic technique was questioned. Meanwhile, families of the victims watched and waited with a mixture of hope and dread. Some had been waiting for closure for over 15 years. They had endured false hopes, countless dead-end investigations, and years of painful silence while their daughters' cases went cold. Now, with a suspect finally in custody and facing trial, they faced another agonizing wait for the justice they had been promised for so long. In March 2025, a significant development occurred outside the courtroom that severed another connection to Heuermann's former life. He and his estranged wife, Asa Ellerup, reached a comprehensive divorce settlement, officially ending their marriage and severing another tie to the normal suburban existence he had maintained while allegedly leading a double life as a serial killer. But the most significant revelation came from ongoing forensic analysis of evidence that had been stored for over a decade. Investigators announced they had recovered DNA evidence from one of the earliest crime scenes that not only matched Heuermann perfectly, but was found in a location and context that suggested intimate physical contact with the victim at the time of her death. This evidence, prosecutors claimed with confidence, was the smoking gun they needed to prove not just that Heuermann was present at the scene, but that he was undeniably the person who committed the murder. As we prepare for what legal experts are calling the trial of the century, one haunting question remains unanswered and may never be fully resolved. If Rex Heuermann is indeed the Gilgo Beach Killer, how many more victims are there waiting to be discovered? Investigators have identified over a dozen unsolved cases throughout the region that bear striking similarities to his alleged methods and timeline. The true scope of his crimes may be far more extensive than anyone has yet imagined. As 2025 progresses toward what promises to be a landmark trial, Rex Heuermann's case looms on the legal horizon like a storm cloud. He faces 7 murder charges spanning 3 decades, each carrying the possibility of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The mountain of evidence against him appears overwhelming and insurmountable, yet he continues to maintain his complete innocence through his legal team. This case has fundamentally changed how law enforcement agencies approach serial killer investigations in the modern era. The combination of genetic genealogy, sophisticated cell phone data analysis, and advanced digital forensics represents a revolutionary new era in criminal investigation. Techniques that didn't even exist when the first Gilgo Beach victims were discovered have now potentially solved one of Long Island's most notorious and baffling cases. For the families of the victims, Heuermann's arrest represents both long-awaited vindication and renewed grief that will never fully heal. They have waited years for answers, endured countless false hopes and disappointments, and watched helplessly as their daughters' cases grew cold and seemed forgotten by everyone except them. Now, finally, there is accountability and the promise of justice. But no trial, no conviction, no prison sentence can ever bring back their beloved daughters, sisters, and mothers. The Gilgo Beach case has also highlighted the dangerous vulnerability of sex workers and the immense challenges they face in reporting crimes and seeking protection from law enforcement. These 7 women were daughters, mothers, sisters, friends, human beings whose lives had value and meaning far beyond their profession. Their tragic deaths have sparked important conversations about how society treats its most vulnerable members and whether we do enough to protect those who work in the shadows of our communities. Rex Heuermann's alleged transformation from respected suburban architect to accused serial killer reveals how evil can hide in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy while harboring the darkest of secrets. His neighbors described him as odd and eccentric, but ultimately harmless. His business associates found him quirky and difficult, but competent at his job. His family lived with him for decades without suspecting the monster that prosecutors claim was hiding beneath the surface. No one suspected that behind his unremarkable suburban facade lurked a predator who allegedly stalked and killed women for over 30 years. The investigation continues even as legal proceedings move inexorably toward trial. Task force members are working around the clock reviewing cold cases throughout the region and beyond, looking for additional connections to Heuermann's patterns of behavior. They believe he may have been active in other geographic areas, during other time periods, possibly claiming many more victims than are currently known or suspected. Digital evidence suggests that Heuermann was obsessed with other notorious serial killers, studying their methods like a graduate student, learning from their mistakes, and incorporating their techniques into his own evolving methodology. He researched the BTK killer, the Green River Killer, and other infamous murderers, possibly using their documented techniques to refine his own methods and avoid detection by law enforcement for decades. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire case is Heuermann's alleged ability to completely compartmentalize his crimes from his normal daily life. By day, he designed office buildings and managed a successful architectural practice. By night, investigators believe he stalked potential victims and planned murders with the same methodical precision he brought to his professional work. He attended family dinners and neighborhood barbecues, participated in community events, and maintained friendships while allegedly hiding the darkest and most terrible secrets imaginable. As the legal process unfolds over the coming months, one thing is absolutely certain. The Gilgo Beach case will be studied, analyzed, and discussed for years to come by law enforcement professionals, criminologists, and true crime enthusiasts. It represents both the darkest aspects of human nature and the ultimate triumph of modern investigative techniques over evil. It demonstrates how persistence, advanced technology, and unwavering dedication can solve even the coldest and most challenging cases. The families of Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthélemy, Sandra Costia, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack finally have the answers they have desperately sought for so many years. They know who is accused of taking their precious loved ones away forever. They understand why these innocent women had to die. And very soon, they may finally have the justice that has been denied to them for far too long. Rex Heuermann's upcoming trial will ultimately determine whether he spends the rest of his natural life behind prison walls or somehow manages to escape conviction despite the overwhelming evidence against him. But regardless of the final outcome, his arrest has already brought a measure of closure to families who had almost given up hope after years of disappointment. It has demonstrated that even the most careful and methodical killers can eventually be caught by determined investigators. And it has reminded us all that evil can lurk anywhere, even in the most ordinary and unremarkable places in our communities. The Gilgo Beach Killer's alleged reign of terror is finally over. After 13 long years of fear, 13 years of exhaustive investigation, 13 years of painful waiting, The monster has been caught and caged. Now, at last, it is time for justice to be served. This has been the complete story of Rex Heuermann and the Gilgo Beach murders, one of the most complex, disturbing, and significant serial killer cases in American criminal history. From the shocking discovery of the first victims along Ocean Parkway in 2010 to the dramatic arrest of the alleged killer in 2023, this case has captivated the entire nation and fundamentally changed the way we investigate and solve serial crimes in the modern era. If you found this comprehensive deep dive as compelling and shocking as we intended, make sure you're subscribed to Dark Trail Files for more meticulously researched true crime content that goes deeper than anyone else dares to go. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations into the darkest and most disturbing corners of human nature. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on this incredible case, and let us know what other unsolved mysteries and criminal cases you'd like us to explore and expose in future episodes. Until next time, this is Dark Trail Files, fearlessly following the evidence wherever it leads us, no matter how dark and dangerous the trail becomes.